This video was selected for release this month by my doll faces and pop tarts over on Patreon. Much love to you as always. Hello angel faces, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me. Today I would like to talk about a very favourite subject of mine. I want to talk a little bit about archetypes. I have not touched on this subject enough here on my channel because there's so much to talk about and so many different subjects that I want to cover, but archetypes are incredible. I use them in my magic, in my ritual, in my journaling, in my therapy. In my day-to-day life, I'm constantly seeing archetypes. I'm a full-time tarot reader, so I work with an archetypal system, a system of symbolism that represents blueprints of various different themes and figures and roles that we all contain within us, parts that we play in this beautiful play of life. And so I want to talk a little bit about different things that you can do to work with the archetypes within you, give you a few ideas, just put a little bit of sparkle into your understanding of how archetypes can be used practically in your self-development journey and in your magic and in your ritual and all that goodness. An archetype is any kind of universal symbolic pattern that runs through the collective unconscious and comes up through into everybody's psyche, and it's played out, it manifests in our different roles, in our behaviors, in our attitudes and thought processes, and in our dynamics between each other, in our relationship dynamics. The collective unconscious is a term that was used by Carl Gustav Jung, and basically what it represents is kind of like the reservoir of different symbols that seem to come up through every different era and civilization, and they appear in every different mythopoetic construct. So in every system of mythology and in every religion, we get these different archetypes. And the archetypes are sometimes human roles like mother, father, warrior, caregiver, mystic, artist. There are tons of them. And I'll give you some examples in this video at some point. I don't know what order I'm going to do things in yet. But there's also archetypes that can be situations that happen, like the quest, for example, is an archetype, something that you can find in tons of different stories, tons of different systems of myth and in your own life. The crossroads or the threshold, the initiation is an archetype. The disaster, the catastrophe, the downfall is an archetype. And as you're listening, if you sling cards, you might be thinking, I can think of tarot cards that represent this. And no doubt you probably can. Okay, now that we are all singing from the same hymn sheet, let me talk about a few different things you can do with archetypes for your self-development. Let's get into it. One of the most obvious ways that you can work with the archetypes in your own psyche is to just start to recognize them. Recognize when you have a specific archetype, a specific role coming to the front. Recognize when you are embodying it. When you witness an archetype, you might see that it is coming up as a fear of yours. You might see that it's coming up as a need or a resentment or a worry. You might see that it's coming up in one of your gifts, in one of your strengths, and it's coming through in what you feel is a very positive way. It can come through in all kinds of things. It might come through in your relationship with someone or in the role that you're playing in a conversation that you're having with somebody. And you might think, oh, wow, I'm being really kind of like the good mother archetype in this conversation. Or, you know, my hero archetype is really coming through as I'm going on this journey. I'm really connecting with that. So really, my first tip is to just bring archetypes into consciousness more by recognizing, witnessing them within yourself. And you can begin to witness them in other people as well. And you can even spot them when you're watching a movie, reading a book, listening to an album. You can actually think about what kinds of archetypal energies are really being embodied and displayed in the work that you are enjoying from other people, or in the conversations you're having with people. You can think, oh wow, they're really kind of displaying the damsel in distress or the victim or the villain or the, you know, caretaker or whatever it is. So you can start to see which roles are being played in the art that you're absorbing, in the conversations you're having. My next tip for you is a really awesome one that I love doing. I love thinking about whether or not an archetype inside me is overactive or underactive. An underactive archetype is going to be an archetype that you can't really grasp hold of very often. You're a little bit afraid of it, or you don't see it come very much up in your life, even though you might really need it. And you might actually resent or envy or deeply admire somebody who has a very good grip on that archetypal energy because you don't display it much in yourself. An overactive archetype is the opposite. It's an archetype that is to the front of you a great deal and might need to be kind of like calmed down a little bit, diluted down, or complemented by other archetypes. I'll give you an example of an overactive archetype in my psyche. It's the archetype of the warrior. The archetype of the warrior is big in me. And I realized that like it was overactive, you know, through a lot of my teens and early 20s. I found that I was falling back on, resorting to, let's say, the archetype of the warrior a lot. And when an archetype is overactive, it just means that you rely on it too much, that it comes up when it's not needed, that it comes up in situations where it's not helpful or relevant. An underactive archetype for me, as I was growing up and going into my 20s particularly, was the lover and maybe also the empath. I was going through issues to do with being sensitive to others when I was younger because I was so defensive and self-protective of me, and I was dealing with a lot of rage, a lot of anger, and a lot of unresolved trauma. And so I had to really be able to link into that without being afraid of it, without feeling that it left me vulnerable or weak. Try and think about what kinds of archetypes for you might be overactive or underactive, and which ones have been either overactive or underactive in the past, but you've done the work to straighten that out and get those archetypes on a little bit more of an even keel inside of you. This can be a very, very fun thing to do. If you have an archetype that is not overactive and it's not underactive, that means it's integrated. Well done, you. So an integrated archetype is an archetype that comes up in a positive and balanced way. You have an adjusted relationship with it. It doesn't seem to cause trouble, and it doesn't seem to be something that you can't quite grasp hold of or that you're afraid of. So it's not really extreme, and it's not really distant from you either. It's an archetype where you're comfortable, and most of the time when that archetype is to the front and you're accessing it and interacting with it, it's in a great way. It's in a way that helps you with your forward momentum and you feel comfortable with it. If you look at an archetype, any archetype, and you think to yourself, I don't think that's integrated inside of me, but I'm not really sure whether it's overactive or underactive or what it is, it could be that you just haven't had that many opportunities yet in your life to connect with that archetype. You know, you might not have necessarily needed it. If you don't feel very close to the archetype of the rebel, it's because you didn't feel you had much to rebel against, which I can't relate. Can't relate. There's always a moment to rebel, darling.
Well, I'm actually giving you an order.
Oh, it's an order. In that case, gentlemen, let's at it.
But yeah, if you are not connected to the archetype of the parent, for example, it might be because you're not yourself a parent and you don't often fall into that role or that kind of type in your relationships with people. But it could also be that the archetype is wounded. It could be that that particular archetypal energy inside of you has a lot of unmet needs, a lot of trauma, or it simply wasn't allowed in your family or in your society, you know, the culture that you were raised in. You might not have felt that the environment around you was very receptive to that particular archetype. And so you put it away, you shoved it somewhere. And so it could be that the archetype is wounded, and it could be that you just haven't accessed it very much. I want to talk a little bit about when an archetype is activated and when an archetype is hijacking or possessive, because I think this is really interesting. And I do some of this in my work with my clients when we go into archetype theory and look at where all the archetypes are in somebody's psyche. An activated archetype is an archetype that is really to the front at a certain time in your life. And so it's really doing a lot of the legwork. You're really seeing it come up a lot. And maybe you're noticing that particular archetype in a lot of the media that you're looking at, or a lot of the situations that are coming up in your life. If you're doing a lot of activism, then you might feel like your activist or your protester or your rebel archetype is to the front a lot of the time. If you are building a business or you're, you know, moving forward with your creative pursuits, you might feel that the archetype of the ruler or the sovereign or the artist or the builder is in the driver's seat quite a lot. So that's an activated archetype. Now, when an archetype begins to hijack you or it begins to possess you, it means that it's in the driver's seat to the extent where it's really hard for you to think outside the bounds of that archetypal theme. So you begin to think of everything through the eyes of that archetype. And that's where it starts to become destructive or overactive, as I previously mentioned that my warrior archetype was for me. It was just like driving everything, and I could not see outside of the lens of that archetype because I didn't feel safe to do so. I was like constantly in fight mode, you know? And so there was really such a journey that I had to go on to make sure that that archetype was something that I could connect with, but in a more balanced way, in a way that actually felt healthy for me. So you might notice when an archetype is activated, and then when it's gone up to that point of possessing you or hijacking you. An underactive archetype can possess or hijack also, because you might start to become obsessed with the fact that you can't embody that archetype that archetype is a weakness for you, that you don't like yourself because you can't see that archetype within your behaviors or mindsets. So an overactive or underactive archetype can actually hijack you, because really it's just kind of like an obsession or something that is hurting you, but it can be because it's too increased, and it can also be because it's too decreased. Sometimes I think I've been hijacked by an archetype because I keep seeing it in people that I'm jealous of or that I admire, and I look at them and I think, I can't embody that. I can never be that. And as hard as I try, that's not an archetype that I feel I can play with. It's just not in my toolkit. And then I have to kind of come back to myself, think about my situation, take it back to me, and stop worrying so much about what everybody else is doing or what everybody else has, and really check in with, like, what do you want, Kellyanne, and how can you facilitate this for yourself? If you find that there is an archetype inside of you that is out of balance in any way, you can rebalance it. And the way to do that is through connecting with it, talking to it, addressing it in ritual, addressing it in journaling, addressing it in your therapy sessions or in your conversations with a close loved one. There's so many different ways that we can kind of bring an archetype towards us and get a more balanced, healthy connection with it. Sometimes you might actually want to evoke the archetype. You might want to kind of like really dress up as the archetype, or watch various different films and media where that archetype is very prevalent. Whatever you want to do that makes you feel like, yeah, I'm thinking about this archetype a lot. I'm thinking about it through the timeline of my life. I'm thinking about what scares me about it, or what obsesses me about it. Why is it that I feel this sense of imbalance when it comes to this particular archetype? And you kind of go through the motions of having an initiation and a reconnection with an archetype that has been kind of out of balance within you. When I talk about evocation of the archetype, I'm talking about embodying it. I'm talking about making art that has to do with it. Like I said, dressing up as that archetype, writing a speech from the perspective of that archetype. So you're really welcoming it to come to the front of you and show itself to you. And you might find that when you're working with an archetype that is wounded, it might say a lot of stuff. That part of you might say a lot of stuff that is really difficult. For example, if you have a wounded ruler for some reason, your sovereign, your ruler archetype is not a great aspect of the psyche. There's something wrong. It's overactive, underactive, whatever it is. When you hear from your ruler through art, through journaling, through embodiment and play acting, through somatic work, dancing, whatever it is that you do, you might find like, wow, my ruler is really angry because it feels like I've not given it enough opportunity to shine, or my ruler is really insecure. It just wants to hide under the covers. It doesn't feel like it's free to be sovereign in its own reality. So you actually begin to have a conversation with that archetype. And one thing that I've done is actually written out a conversation between myself and a wounded archetype. So I've started the conversation with like, hey, I know things have been difficult betwixt us, darling. I really want you to come forward and tell me, what is the problem? What can I do to help? Because I know that you're not in a great space. And then I let the archetype come to the front of me. And honestly, I've scribbled so hard when this has happened. I'm like, right, one thing is this, and it's very revealing when I actually welcome that part of me to take center stage and tell me what is going on, like what is it that needs to happen. A wounded archetype can actually tell you when the wound occurred. That's a really interesting thing. So when you look at the timeline of an archetype, you will actually be able to see the moment where there was something fractured or something that made that archetype kind of go into a strange fragmented place in your psyche. I know when my warrior archetype became overactive. It was when I was living with a very unpredictable, physically domineering, unpleasant man who was not my father. It was my mum's second husband, and it was a whole shit show. And I know that at that point, that's when the warrior kicked in. Now, definitely my own father figure didn't help the situation either, with his own behavior and the fact that I admired him greatly, but there was something very warrior-like about him, which he was doing very little to dilute. So I was given examples, both kind of in a toxically positive way, but also in a really scary, horrible way, that made me get a screwed up relationship with the warrior archetype. So I know when that archetype started to go woo down a shadow avenue. So my question to you is, if you know that you have a wounded archetype, When did the wound occur? Do you know when the wound occurred? Is it something that you need to journal about? Is it something that you need to do a healing ritual or spell around? One thing that I find really interesting is that some archetypes can really be very strong allies to you. The archetypes that are the most useful and that actually are the strongest in certain situations can be consciously brought forth. For example, if you know that you've got to do a really difficult task and you're dreading it and you're kind of thinking, oh my God, this is going to take a lot of brain power, this is going to take a lot of patience or whatever, you can actually decide which archetypes you want to bring to the front. You can say, okay, well, I'm really going to need my builder archetype, or I'm going to need my jester, or, or joker kind of archetype. I'm going to need my mother archetype, like whatever. You can decide, okay, I know that I've got to bring that archetype forth. And then you can do certain things like wear certain clothing or jewelry or props and accessories or colors that represent that archetype that you need to have in the driver's seat. So it can get very creative, and it's very much an exciting feeling that you have a full archetypal toolkit inside of you, and you can invite certain archetypes to work with you on things so that you get the most incredible results. One thing that you can do that I know a lot of people are really going to love, a lot of people that watch my videos are going to love this, you can actually call together a council of different archetypes. So if you need to troubleshoot or problem solve something or plan something, if you need to strategize in some way, you can actually say, okay, I'm going to bring together some of my different archetypes and we're going to have a round table conversation and they're all going to give me their input. This is something that you can do with archetypes that are very specific to you, like parts of your psyche that you've identified. I know a lot of people do parts work, and I love doing parts work. I will leave a video down below all about some of the parts of my psyche that I work with and have identified. So you can call them together, and you can also call together like the archetype of the queen, the archetype of the hermit. If you read tarot, think about which archetypes from tarot you want to bring in. You might even literally want to bring in like the figure from 9 of Pentacles, the figure from, 7 of Wands, and actually ask them what they think. Get guidance, get counsel from your council of archetypes about what you should do and what you might be missing and what your strengths would be in a situation and what to avoid and what you might be unaware of that you need to be aware of. There are so many different things you can do with archetypes, but I do just want to mention the Mythic Mirror. The Mythic Mirror is basically this whole notion of when you see an archetype in a story, in a fairy tale, in a movie, in a book, if you see kind of like a certain role or a certain figure outside of yourself and it mirrors back to you the state of that archetype within you, this is a really, really powerful thing. And if you know that you have a wounded archetype and you need to do some work on it, it might be worthwhile to think about absorbing some media of some kind that actually includes that archetype, or to go looking for that archetype with any of the media that you're absorbing or the conversations you're having, the people that you're meeting, the art that you're looking at, the art that you're creating. For example, let's say your playful child archetype is wounded. Look for playful child archetypes in the media you're consuming, in the art you're consuming, in the topics of conversation that come up, in random things that you pass in the street. Tune in to the playful child archetype and really see if you can bring it home to yourself. See what it reflects about the state of that archetype within you. There is so many things about the nature of story and the nature of art that teaches us about the story and the art of our own life journey and where we are in the quest just at this moment in time. If you need to do any unblocking of an archetype that feels like it's very stagnant or it's very dense or there's problems there, it feels wounded, you can do archetype cleansing, archetype initiations. You can decide that you're going to work on some kind of ritual that is designed to heal that archetype, cleanse that archetype, bring it home to you, welcome it back in, give it a room inside the house of yourself, make a collage or write a poem or write a song that represents that archetype and the relationship that you have with it. So archetype work can go into so many different places and it can just get so creative that I just constantly fall in love with it. I'm never over the possibilities when it comes to archetype work. Darlings, before I wrap this video up today, I am going to give you a list of just a few archetypes. There are literally so many. You can just Google lists of them forever. But I'm going to give you a list of 10 and welcome you to work on these archetypes and see, are they underactive? Are they overactive? Do you want to do something with them? Where are they in your psyche? And see how you connect with them. But before I do that, I just want to let you know there is a lot going on in my world right now when it comes to what I'm offering, okay? My Yule and New Year readings are out. You can get an Embrace 2026 reading. You can get the mini Embrace 2026. I've got the Spirit of Yule reading that it's out for those of you that want to make Yule really special. And I've got the Snow Queen reading, which comes back every year and people do love that one. So please go over to my website and check out my Yule and New Year offerings if you want the Gregorian calendar 2025 to go out with a bang. And I'm also running a workshop on January 18th, my darlings. It's called Astral Army, and it's all about servitor creation. I welcome you also to have a look at the details for that workshop and grab a ticket if you're interested. There is still some available. Finally, I am doing a 3-day prayer retreat over on Patreon for Yule. I have not completely designed the cover art yet for the booklet, but basically it's 3 days of group prayer with beads. You're going to love it. We did one a while ago for Self-Love September, and it just went off like a massive treat. I loved it to bits. So if you want to do some group prayer work over on my Patreon, all tiers are welcome. Please go over to my Patreon, join any tier to join in with the fun, and let's pray together for 3 days over the course of Yule. Okay, my darlings, here are 10 archetypes that I welcome you to just be getting on with. Like I said, there are so many, and let me know if you want more videos about archetype work, because I'd be very happy to go into a lot more of my different experiences and theories and things that have come up for me that have been so fascinating. But here are 10 archetypes I welcome you to gauge within your own psyche. The first archetype is the hero. This is the part of you that faces challenges, that goes on the quest, that overcomes the odds. You are going on a mission. That's the hero. That's the kind of like active or conscious side of the hero. The shadow of the hero can sometimes be hubris, arrogance, irresponsibility, danger seeking or thrill seeking, and sometimes also martyrdom or self-importance. The next one is the caregiver. I wrote down that the caregiver is the part of you that obviously nurtures others and offers great compassion. You are in service to others. You check in with other people's needs. The shadow, obviously, of the caregiver can very often be self-sacrifice, self-erasure, and codependence. So where are you with the caregiver? The third archetype is the rebel. This is the part of you, obviously, that creates change, that breaks the rules, that sees that another future or another kind of life could be possible. You are not content with the constraints you're currently placed in. You want more, you want it different, you want to break it and remake it. The shadow of the rebel can be destruction, alienation, insistence on your own vision no matter the cost, hurting people in order to get what you want done. And also maybe, I don't know, hot-headed or headstrong or whatever. The lover is the fourth archetype. This is the part of you that seeks connection and love and sensuality and harmony and really wants to be connected to other people. The shadow of the lover can be things like obsession, loss of self, assimilation with the other in a way that feels like you're losing yourself or distancing yourself from who you are as an individual. Codependency, again, a little bit like the caretaker. The fifth archetype that I wrote down is the one that I told you I've had so many problems with. It's the warrior. The warrior defends, asserts, and protects boundaries. The warrior is not afraid to fight on one's own behalf and on behalf of others. The warrior sleeps with one eye open. Obviously, the positive of that is being able to protect and defend yourself and other people, but the negatives can be domination, aggression, very quick to judge situations, very quick to put your fists up and get into fight mode without thinking things through. The next archetype is the creator or the artist. This is the part of you that wants to express truth. You want to bring forth what is within you. You want to put things into the world instead of taking things out of the world. And you want to make things that are beautiful or interesting. Seems all good, right? But the shadow of the creator is perfectionism, fear of judgment, insecurity, fragile ego, things of that nature, maybe competitive, maybe there's a visibility wound there. See what's going on with the artist inside of you, darlings. The ruler or sovereign is the next archetype. This is the part of you that leads with authority and vision. This is the part of you that is in charge of your life, that is forging forward with your vision and believing that you are entitled to do as you see fit to do with your world. Obviously, the shadow of the sovereign or ruler is tyranny. Tyranny, dictatorial, obsessed with your own way, won't hear reason, those kinds of things. The magician is an archetype I wanted to mention, transforming reality with your insight, with your power, with your vision, with your autonomy, connecting with energies that you thread together to create great alchemy. There's confidence there, there's strength there, there's excitement. But the shadows can be being delusional, being kind of like unrealistic, sometimes even being manipulative, manipulating situations for your own ends. Even a little bit of a snake oil salesman is in the shadow of the magician. The jester or the fool is an archetype that I invite you to look at. This is the part of you that brings joy, that brings humor, that is light-hearted, that has a sense of perspective around things, that wants to enjoy life, that wants to have a good time. The shadow of this can be not taking things seriously, deflecting things that are actually quite important, being irresponsible, being somebody that is not seen as trustworthy or serious.
The power grid was shut off by Dickless here.
They caused an explosion. Is this true?
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
The next archetype that I welcome you to look at is the archetype of the hunter, or if you want to say huntress, you can. This is the part of you that is very goal-oriented, that is focused, that is keen to hit the target. You are somebody that wants to be self-sufficient, self-motivated, and moving forward, sort of stalking what you want and getting it, and then being self-sustained as a result of that. The shadows can be detachment from the rest of the world in favor of your own kind of like mark that you're trying to hit. So it can be disconnection. There can also be an obsession there, and there can also be a greed, a selfishness, a desire to only get what you want at the expense of everything and everyone else. The final archetype that I welcome you to look at, my darlings, is the archetype of the hermit. Yes, card 9 in tarot. This is the part of you that seeks clarity and wisdom through silence and solitude. This is the part of you that wants to sort of be in a conversation with the divine and is able to move away from the noise of the world, get away, right? Lose the signal and really connect with what is transformative and transpersonal and be in your deep wisdom. The shadows of the hermit can obviously involve too much withdrawal to an unhealthy extent, fear of connection with others, distrust of others, and sometimes even a sense of superiority over others. So I very much welcome you to look at these archetypes within yourself and see which ones are shadowy for you, which ones are wounded, which ones are allies, which ones are nicely activated. Get at me in the comments down below and tell me. Darlings, it's been wonderful to talk to you about archetypes for a little bit today. Thank you so much for your time and attention on this. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to see anything and everything that you have to say down below, because this is just a subject that I find so ceaselessly fascinating and so useful and so important. So yeah, get at me, let me know all of your thoughts and feels. Thank you so much for being here. So much love until next time. Happy archetype working and blessed be. Mwah.